How will the Trump administration handle the first big test of its emergency response?
Let's bring in former Utah congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. Good to see you, sir. And I think the big question, the big point I want to pull out from the research that you gave us on this, don't think federal government is going to bail you out. Explain that.
No, don't think the feds are going to come running and save you. I mean, they're going to do everything they can, and it does appear as if President Trump is way ahead of this, much more than President Obama was last year. You would think after Katrina we had learned a lot of these lessons, but not so, because August of last year, massive flooding in a no-name storm in Baton Rouge, 146,000 people in their homes damaged, tens of thousands of people displaced. FEMA did a good job initially getting water out there, but housing was a massive problem. It was an absolute disaster. They got more than 30 inches of rain, and yet FEMA was absolutely pathetic. We had several hearings on this in the House, and I worry that they haven't learned these lessons.
And you've seen this at the local level. I mean, we were talking about this.
Yes.
Jason and I go way back. I mean, you've been congressman for a number of years, but you were also the chief of staff when my dad was governor of Utah.
Yep.
You guys dealt with a number of things, including a mine collapse, when he first got in office, flooding. So you've seen how important it is at the local level to help the people out and to coordinate with the executive branch.
I was a newly minted chief of staff to your dad, the 16th governor of Utah. It was literally 5 days into his administration down in St. George, Utah, massive flooding, loss of homes. Probably the most important thing that he did is he actually got down there, got feet on the ground, because you can actually move and push resources. At the end of the day, it's going to be your local community. You know, this is the thing that's inspiring to me is you're going to have ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. It's going to be your local church group. It's going to be your local affiliates. It's going to be your mayor who's really going to make the biggest difference because it affects literally millions of people.
Right,
what did you learn out of those hearings, though? You talk about the bureaucracy, right? Is that the problem here, trying to move these resources, getting the relationships between the state and local officials and the federal government? What did you learn in those hearings?
Total lack of communication from FEMA. You got a lot of desk jockeys in Washington, D.C., but when you actually talk to the local mayors where there's maybe 1,000 people in town, that's where the real problem is. And there's a lot of attention on this, but when we get to midweek and the storm starts to dissipate, that's when a lot of the problems come. In Katrina, 2 out of the 3 people that died happened after the fact because the levees broke. The water starts to get rancid. Livestock is dying. And so they don't have electricity. They don't have a way to communicate. Shut-ins are running out of medication. That's when the death toll starts to go up. And that's what you really got to worry about. And that's what FEMA, you would think, would learn these lessons, but that's where they have fallen down.
I mean, you talk about President Trump, and this is really the first big test he has of a natural disaster being in office. How important is it to have the right people around you? You think about General John Kelly, who is now chief of staff in the White House, who ran DHS, who's been on the front lines of a number of different crises overseas in war. How helpful will those voices be for the president to help navigate this situation?
One thing I think Donald Trump has done exceptionally well as the president is he's surrounded people with a military mindset. And they don't take no for an answer. They know how to move resources. Now, they have a new FEMA director. He's only been approved. It was confirmed by the Senate about 2 months ago. So you got a fairly new, fresh face there heading up FEMA. But again, you also have a Governor Abbott who is very seasoned in this. Texas knows how to take care of itself. Right. You had a fairly pathetic governor, in my opinion, in Louisiana, Governor Edwards, who didn't even know how many people were affected 6 months after the disaster down there. So between Governor Abbott, I think the president, he does have a good military mindset around him. Texas is pretty tough, too.
Jason, in your opinion, when should President Trump visit the affected area?
Well, you got to be careful because everybody's going to try to move heaven and earth. The president's coming. He announced he's going to go, but you got to let it subside a little bit. I think it's most important that he's on the phone with the governor. Let the governor ask for resources. Where do things need to be mobilized? They got 700 National Guard down there. It's probably going to take more than that if you've got that many millions of people. But again, it's going to be your first responders. It's going to be that person who's a plumber, who's just working, 20 hours a day helping his neighbor. Those are the people that are probably going to make the best difference. Those are going to be the inspirational stories.
You're so right, the local community. And let's just hope this doesn't turn political anytime soon, as it often does. Jason, always good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir.